Star Trek already answered which character is Enterprise captain when Lower Decks ends. For decades, the USS Enterprise has been the beating heart of Star Trek. Every series, spin-off, and even parody eventually finds its way back to that legendary starship and the captains who command her. With Star Trek Lower Decks nearing its conclusion, many fans have been asking the big question: who is captain of the Enterprise when the animated series ends? The answer isn't just speculation. Star Trek canon has already given us a strong clue: the timeline that matters. To understand the future of the Enterprise during the Lower Decks era, we need to look at the timeline. Lower Decks is set in the late 2380s, shortly after Star Trek Nemesis and before the events of Star Trek Picard. During this window, we know Jean-Luc Picard has stepped down from command of the Enterprise E. Worf eventually assumes the captain's chair for a time, and the Federation is moving toward the political upheavals that define Picard. By the time Lower Decks wraps up, it exists in this transitional period, after the TNG films, but before Picard Season 1. That means whoever is commanding the Enterprise during the series' ending has already been determined in canon. Worf's moment in the chair. Clues about who sits in the captain's chair come straight from Star Trek Picard Season 3. In one of its most satisfying payoffs, the series confirms that Worf was once the captain of the Enterprise E. When questioned about what happened to the ship, Worf tersely remarks, "That was not my fault." That single line is both humorous and deeply revealing, showing that his tenure as captain ended in an incident worth whispering about across Starfleet. For longtime fans, Worf's rise makes sense. He had been building toward command throughout Deep Space Nine, where he served as first officer of the Defiant and proved himself in countless battles. By the 2380s, he was the logical successor once Picard moved on. That means as Lower Decks approaches its finale, the Enterprise E is likely under Worf's command. What about Riker? Of course, the other obvious candidate is William Riker. At the end of Nemesis, Riker leaves the Enterprise to become captain of the USS Titan. Lower Decks firmly establishes him in that role, showing him still commanding the Titan alongside Deanna Troi. But canon later reveals that Riker eventually transitions back to the Enterprise, taking command of the Enterprise F sometime before Star Trek Picard Season 3. This timing is crucial. By the Lower Decks finale period, Riker is still years away from that promotion. He's happily leading the Titan, showing up in Lower Decks for comedic cameos, and carving his own legend apart from Picard. That leaves Worf as the most likely candidate for Enterprise captaincy during the animated series' conclusion. The Enterprise F and the changing of the guard. Another wrinkle in the timeline is the arrival of the Enterprise F, which is canonically decommissioned in Picard Season 3. This suggests that after Worf's tenure on the Enterprise E ended, Starfleet commissioned a new flagship. Riker is implied to have eventually taken command of this ship before it was retired, cementing his connection to the Enterprise legacy. This changing of the guard means that by the time Lower Decks is over, the Enterprise E may already be winding down her service life under Worf, with the Enterprise F waiting on the horizon. Lower Decks' subtle hints. Though Lower Decks doesn't put the Enterprise at the forefront, it constantly reminds fans that the legendary ship is still out there. Boimler and Mariner talk about Picard and the TNG crew as living legends. Worf's presence in the Lower Decks timeline has been teased through name drops and in jokes, suggesting the writers know exactly where he is during this era. Given that the show thrives on deep-cut references, it's no stretch to imagine Lower Decks' finale subtly nodding to Worf's time in the captain's chair, possibly even bringing the Enterprise E in for one last animated glory shot. Why Worf is the perfect choice. Worf becoming captain of the Enterprise isn't just a piece of trivia. It's a culmination of his decades-long arc. He began as outsider Klingon, trying to fit into Starfleet on the Next Generation. On Deep Space Nine, he learned to balance Klingon honor with Starfleet duty. By the time of Lower Decks, Worf has grown into a seasoned leader, wise enough to hold the most prestigious command in the fleet. This trajectory gives Lower Decks an emotional anchor. The show is about underdog proving themselves, and who better to represent that spirit than Worf, the Klingon who was once underestimated but ultimately rose to command the Enterprise. The answer we already have. So when fans ask, who is captain of the Enterprise when Lower Decks ends? The answer is already in canon. It's Worf. By the late 2380s, Worf has taken command of the Enterprise E, filling the void left by